Welcome to Military Analytics. The Ukrainian war on the territory of Eastern Europe continues in the eastern and southern directions. The eastern front line is held by the fortress city of Bakhmut, and in the southern front line, the goal is to achieve success on the Crimean route. The Kiev leader's goal is shaping the Ukrainian war. As Zelensky often emphasizes, the war started with Crimea and will end with Crimea. The Ukrainian armed forces continue their efforts on the route targeted by their leaders. Ukrainian troops are achieving significant success in the key area holding the southern front line. Let's take a closer look at what's happening on the southern front line. Speculation about Ukraine's long-awaited spring offensive continues to rise. The developments that triggered these speculations took place in the Dnipro River the other day. Images from Russian military bloggers provided the first reliable geolocated image of Ukrainian positions south of the river. According to conflict analysts, Ukrainian troops managed to cross the Dnipro River in the south of the country for the first time since the beginning of the Russian invasion. Crossing the Dnipro is crucial to the Ukrainian military's goal of controlling Crimea, which Moscow annexed 9 years ago. Ukrainian troops aim to advance about 161 kilometers south of the river, at least as far as the annexed Crimea. This breakthrough comes just after rumors of a partial withdrawal in Russia's Kherson region. As is known, the Dnipro River has been the front line since the Russian troops withdrew from Kherson in November. In addition, according to experts at the Institute for War Studies in the United States, the scope and purpose of these Ukrainian positions, Ukraine's ability and willingness to maintain permanent positions in this area, remain unclear. The Russian-appointed governor of the Kherson region denied reports that Ukrainian forces were positioned on the eastern bank of the Dnipro River. The governor stressed that the region is completely controlled by the Russian army. The governor of Kherson, however, acknowledges that sabotage groups may land, but the governor insists that the sabotage groups will eventually be destroyed by Russian fighters or thrown back into the water. Former Kherson Mayor Vladimir Saldo stated in a Telegram update that Russian forces have full control over the area. Vladimir Saldo has suggested that the images referenced by the ESRB may be of Ukrainian sabotage units who managed to take a selfie along the Dnipro before being pushed back. Natalia Humeniuk, spokesperson for Ukraine's Southern Operational Command, asked for patience in response to reports in the Ukrainian media that the establishment of certain positions marked the beginning of a counterattack. Natalia Humeniuk did not confirm or deny the report. Humeniuk stated that the details of military operations in the Dnipro Delta cannot be disclosed for operational and security reasons. Humeniuk also mentioned on Ukrainian television that crossing a wide and powerful river like the Dnipro while crossing the front line is a very difficult task. On the other hand, according to the reports of the Institute of War Studies, Ukrainian forces established positions near the town of Oleshki across the Dnipro Delta from Kherson. According to the report, Ukrainian forces are advancing towards the nearby village of Dapchi. It is also claimed that Ukrainian troops have held these positions for several weeks and secured supply lines. This claim also shows that there is no Russian control in the region. However, Russian military figures are reportedly considering consolidating their current gains in Ukraine rather than launching new operations due to material and manpower constraints. These days are very active on the southern front line of Ukraine. Ukrainians who are trying to advance to Crimea by crossing the Dnipro River are also taking precautions in attacks against Crimea. The armed forces of Ukraine deployed a long-range missile system, Grom-2, in Zaporizhia for attacks on Crimea. The Grom-2 missile system has a range of up to 300 kilometers, which allows the Ukrainian army to attack the territory of Crimea. Vladimir Rogov, head of the Zaporizhia movement We Are With Russia, announced that the Grom-2 long-range operational tactical missile system was transferred by Ukrainian troops to the city of Zaporizhia under the control of Kiev. RIA Novosti reported that, according to Rogov, this missile system could be used for attacks in Crimea. Rogov argues that these actions confirm the need to push the Ukrainian troops as far as possible from the Zaporizhia region, and the line of contact should be moved deeper into Ukraine. Earlier, Vladimir Rogov also reported that Ukrainian troops accumulated military equipment in metallurgical factories and granaries in the Orosovsky and Pokrovsky districts of the Zaporizhia region under the control of Ukrainian forces. The successes of Ukraine on the southern front line greatly alarm the Russian troops. The Russians, who could not prevent the Ukrainian forces in the Dnipro River, have difficulty in resisting the Kiev troops on the eastern front line. Now let's turn our route to what happened in the fortress city of Bakhmut. President Volodymyr Zelensky promised to fight in the besieged city of Bakhmut, despite the approach of Russian forces from three sides. Zelensky said, "It is impossible for us to give up Bakhmut because it will widen the front and give the Russian forces and Wagner a chance to capture more of our country." Kiev troops are fighting both Russian soldiers and the Wagner paramilitary group in Bakhmut. The ghost town of Bakhmut offers the Russian vistas from hell. The Russian army has lost thousands of men in Bakhmut in recent weeks for every kilometer of land captured around the city of Bakhmut. Hundreds of Russian soldiers were eliminated. Russia's Wagner mercenary group led most of the Bakhmut conflict. The Wagner group also took a lot of losses in these conflicts. In fact, the majority of the soldiers lost in Bakhmut were mercenary groups. The prolongation of the war continues to negatively affect the Russian army. Russian troops experiencing a lack of equipment and psychological collapse are having a hard time holding on to the front lines. Vladimir Putin's frivolous Bakhmut insistence puts his army in trouble. Russia is almost melting in this small city, which has now become a symbolic conflict between the two countries. But the Institute for War Studies has revealed that Russian forces are focused on capturing Bakhmut as soon as possible before launching Ukraine's much-anticipated counteroffensive. Wagner leader Yevgeny Prigozhin said Bakhmut handed over his north and southwestern flanks to the Russian Ministry of Defense. Meanwhile, the Russian Air Force supports Wagner's main effort in the city, which has been fought over 4 months. According to the War Studies Institute forecasts, this air support appears to allow Wagner to make further gains and push the Ukrainian forces towards a withdrawal from Bakhmut. The collaboration between Wagner and VDV shows that the Russian military leadership, which Prigozhin had previously criticized, demonstrates Moscow's desire to hasten the capture of Bakhmut. The think tank said that the pattern of commitment around the city shows that the Russian military leadership increasingly prioritizes completing the capture of the city before the start of the counteroffensive. Vladimir Putin is determined to seize Bakhmut no matter what. Even if Putin's troops succeed in capturing Bakhmut, it will not be considered a win. The capture of this city, which cost the lives of thousands of soldiers, will be nothing more than a symbol of Putin's failure. In addition, the meltdown of the Russian army on other front lines, including Bakhmut, puts Putin in a lot of trouble. Putin is launching new campaigns to compensate for soldier losses and to recruit more soldiers. The Russian Ministry of Defense has launched a massive new recruiting campaign for volunteers. The goal of the campaign is to attract 400,000 volunteers. Ads across the country target the masculine pride and financial needs of young Russians to attract volunteers to the Russian armed forces. We will see how effective Putin's new campaign will be in the coming days. As a result, the successes on the southern front, including in Kherson, make Ukraine more determined about Crimea. The Kiev leader repeats at every opportunity that the war will end with the liberation of Crimea. The Kherson and Dnipro rivers will always be in the foreground in the Ukrainian war. A success here will play a role in bringing the Kiev leader closer to his dream of Crimea. Poland is an important regional power on the border with Ukraine, especially with the military upgrade of the U.S. Army in Poland and the presence of the most powerful U.S. war machines in the Polish Army. This has made Poland the eastern fortress of the alliance. Poland was also among the countries most affected by the Russia-Ukraine war, as it is a neighbor to Ukraine. That's why the Warsaw government is trying to protect its borders. There is a historical sense of insecurity in relations between Poland and Russia, and the Ukraine war has further cemented this insecurity. In fact, the developments may drag Poland into a wider conflict that could have devastating consequences. According to some experts, Russia's next target may be Poland. Poland and the United States have had a bumpy relationship over the years, but the war in Ukraine brought them closer and made Poland an indispensable ally. Poland has taken measures to ensure it is not the next target and to challenge Vladimir Putin. Cooperation between the two countries has been increasing in recent years. The United States is strengthening its military presence near the Russian borders. Polish officials had been demanding the U.S. to establish a permanent military base in their country for many years in the face of a possible Russian threat. In March, the first permanent U.S. military garrison on Polish soil was opened. Thus, the number of permanent U.S. military bases in Europe increased to 8. Camp Kosciuszko, the first permanent U.S. military garrison on Polish soil, started its operations with a ceremony in the city of Poznan. Military officials from both countries and the Polish Minister of National Defense, Mariusz Błaszczak, attended the opening ceremony of the first permanent military unit at the garrison level. Błaszczak said that at a time when Russia is trying to rebuild its empire and attacked Ukraine, they value the constant presence of the U.S. armies in the country. The United States will also transfer 19 air tankers of the United States National Guard and the U.S. Air Force Reserve to Poland, Poland, in the coming months. The move aims to strengthen the U.S. Air Force's presence in Eastern Europe and ensure the security of allies within NATO. The main task of the deployed tankers, which includes Kake-135 Stratotanker, Kake-10 Extender, and the latest Kake-46 Pegasus, is to refuel warplanes, including the 35A Lightning II. This will increase the range of NATO missions in the region. According to the U.S. Air Force Command, the transfer is being made from Spangdahlem Air Base in Germany to Polish territory as part of Operation Copper Arrow. These activities testify to the seriousness of NATO's intention to ensure the security of its members and maintain stability in the region. This critical move by the U.S. is a necessary step in light of threats from Russia and other potential enemies. From the beginning of March, the tankers began to carry out their duties from the base in Powice. The tankers refueled Kake-46 Pegasus and Finnish Air Force F/A-18 from the 931st Air Base at McConnell on April 13. The measures taken by Poland are not limited to this extent. The Polish government says that within 2 years, the country's armed forces will double, making it one of the most powerful military groups in Europe. Polish Defense Minister Mariusz Błaszczak announced plans to increase the country's army from 150,000 to 300,000 due to Russian aggression. The defense minister wants Poland to build an army big enough to act as a dam that won't be demolished by Russia. With this move, Poland aims to deploy its army up to the Russian border. In addition, Poland stated that by increasing the number of soldiers, it will have an army 3 times the size of the United Kingdom. The UK Army has around 100,000 soldiers in active service. Faced with a general election in the autumn, the Polish government also embarked on a massive defense spending spree of billions of pounds that resulted in massive orders for tanks, artillery, and warplanes. Defense Minister Mariusz Błaszczak said, "We want to serve for another term because then we can finish the process we started." Mariusz Błaszczak said he needed 2 more years. Błaszczak stated that within 2 years, the Polish army will be the strongest in Europe. Błaszczak added that Poland will soon receive dozens of US-made Abrams tanks. The government has ordered 116 old M1A1 Abrams as a temporary measure to replace tanks shipped to Ukraine. The minister stated that the older Abrams will join the 18th Mechanized Division stationed in eastern Poland. In another development, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd J. Austin III and Polish Defense Minister Mariusz Błaszczak held a meeting at the Pentagon. At the meeting, the two ministers discussed the situation in Ukraine and ways to strengthen interoperability between the U.S. and Poland. The two met, in part, to sign the Mutual Defense Supply Agreement, which will deepen the partnership between the country's defense industry bases. Lloyd Austin welcomed Błaszczak, who also served as Deputy Prime Minister. Austin brought up Thaddeus Kosciuszko, a Polish officer who fought with the Continental Army during the American Revolutionary War. Austin said, "Since the founding of our republic, Americans and Poles have fought side by side, and the bond between the two countries continues to grow stronger to this day." Defense Minister Austin said that Poland's support for Ukraine is strong. The U.S. Defense Secretary noted that Poland is a leader in providing the Ukrainian army with weapons and training it needs to defend itself from Russian invasion. Austin said, "In fact, we would never have been able to do so much for Ukraine after the indefensible invasion of Russia if it were not for Poland's enormous contribution." The Polish defense minister praised solidarity, unity, and unprecedented support. Mariusz expressed his belief that this will continue until Ukraine's victory. Additionally, the Polish defense minister will travel to Illinois to celebrate the 30th anniversary of his country's partnership with the Illinois National Guard as part of the state partnership program. So how is the relationship between Ukraine and Poland? The position of Poland as Ukraine's most staunch supporter, both in Europe and in the world, has changed. The heart of Europe now beats in Warsaw, as it is known. Poland formed a tank coalition shortly after the war started with the participation of various countries. The coalition expanded, and the support for Ukraine increased. Some of the 14 Leopard 2 tanks that Poland promised to Ukraine are about to reach the territory of Kiev. Poland became the first Western ally to transfer modern Leopard tanks to Ukraine. In addition, Poland led lobbying efforts to impose harsh sanctions against Russia and support Ukraine with strong political, economic, and military assistance. It has donated major military aid to Ukraine, including the main channel of military supply and 300 tanks from its own stockpiles. Polish leaders were among the first to arrive in Kiev as artillery still bombarded the city, and the country supports Ukraine's early accession to the European Union. On the other hand, Poland is implementing a program to increase ammunition stocks for the needs of its own army. The war in Ukraine indicates the need for substantial ammunition stocks, especially for artillery. This leads to the implementation of a long-term program in Poland called the National Ordnance Reserve. The purpose of the National Ordnance Reserve program is to expand and diversify the national production base of large-caliber artillery munitions and replenish its own stockpiles. The main efforts are aimed at increasing the production of large-caliber artillery shells, which are currently insufficient in Europe, both to replenish their own stocks and to deliver them quickly to Ukraine as military aid. The program will run between 2023 and 2029. The program will be implemented based on the resources of the Polish Development Fund, the Industrial Development Agency, the State Strategic Reserves Agency, and the Ministry of National Defense. Poland also aims to expand the production of shells for Abrams tanks with armor-piercing cores made of depleted uranium. The country wants to establish a business in Europe that will maintain and repair Abrams tanks. It seems that the Ukrainian war was not limited to affecting the lands of Eastern Europe. Only Russia's aggression has mobilized its border neighbors in the first place. Poland, in particular, dealt an unexpected blow to Putin with its latest moves. During the war between Ukraine and Russia, Russian soldiers and senior frontline commanders who opposed Moscow's invasion plans dramatically changed their minds, and the tide of the war is now starting to turn in favor of the Ukrainians. The number of surrenders among Russian soldiers who have been closely followed for a long time has peaked in recent days. Russian soldiers and commanders who laid down their weapons and decided to fight for the Ukrainian army joined the military units of the Ukrainian armed forces, which include foreign fighters. In this context, the most prominent military unit is the Free Russia Legion Group. This legion is a military unit of the Ukrainian army, consisting almost entirely of Russians and also includes citizens from Belarus and other countries of the world. One of the most striking features of the Free Russian Legion is that many senior commanders under the command of the Russian armed forces voluntarily join this unit and fight for the Ukrainian army. In addition, thousands of Russian soldiers affected by the decision of the Russian commanders to join Ukraine follow their commanders and join the Ukrainian army. For this purpose, 3 senior frontline commanders in the Russian army recently joined the Ukrainian army. In addition, the Russian soldiers in the troops led by these 3 Russian commanders who decided to surrender and fight for Ukraine went over to the side of the Ukrainian army. The Russian soldiers who did not leave their commanders alone stated that they were satisfied with the decision they made and that they would support the freedom struggle of the Ukrainians until the end of the war. It was claimed that the Russian commanders and soldiers who surrendered and joined the Ukrainian army were from the troops fighting on the front lines in the Donbass region. The Kiev administration, on the other hand, keeps the personal data of these 3 Russian commanders who joined the Ukrainian army and the Russian soldiers in the units under their command confidential. Some of these Russian soldiers who decided to surrender and fight for Ukraine now have a code name. And in the military, these people are only known by their code names. But their war is not on the active front. This is too risky in the current situation, and loyalty needs to be proven. They are tasked with providing critical intelligence to the existing Ukrainian troops and the Russian Volunteer Legion. This unit, which is now joining the Ukrainian army, has an important intelligence advantage. And the Ukrainian army will use this information in active frontline operations. In this way, they will prove their loyalty. In fact, such situations are constantly seen on the battlefield. In other words, many soldiers and commanders in the Russian army change their minds to the side of Ukraine and fight against the soldiers of their own country. So what are the most important factors affecting the situation? Of course, the answer to this question is somewhat complicated. However, when we consider the war strategies of the Russian administration and the Russian armed forces, it seems much easier for the soldiers in the mobilized Russian army to join the Ukrainian ranks. Because the mobilized Russian soldiers are still fighting for their lives on the Ukrainian battlefield under harsh conditions. It is not surprising that Russian soldiers and commanders who are trying to fight in difficult conditions join the Ukrainian army in order to live in a much better condition and to get rid of Russia's oppressive regime. The Russian-Ukrainian war, on the other hand, has so far seen a significant number of foreign fighters join both sides of the clashes before the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022. It was estimated that there were about 17,000 foreign fighters in Ukraine. Also, since the beginning of the war, foreign fighters have traveled to Ukraine to fight in clashes for various reasons, such as extreme left or right-winged ideologues, opposition to Russia or the West. In this way, the number of foreign fighters in the Ukrainian army suddenly began to increase. The Ukrainian government announced the formation of an officially sanctioned foreign legion about 2 days after the war began. Following this announcement, Ukrainian authorities received approval from some Western governments for their foreign military contingent. After the approval, the Ukrainians began to expand their military contingent of foreign soldiers. The Belarusian Kastysky-Linovsky Regiment was one of the largest such military units on the Ukrainian side. Over the past year, the Ukrainian army has grown at least threefold as these troops joined, and the Ukrainians and the Kiev administration called in additional military forces. For every professional soldier in the Ukrainian army, there are 2 or 3 newly mobilized people. People bring their knowledge and skills from their civilian professions to the Ukrainian army. Since the commanders do not constrain their mobilized soldiers, there is an environment conducive to inventing new ways and processes to solve problems within the Ukrainian army. To achieve this effect, the Ukrainian military needed horizontal structures, motivation, and bottom-up initiative within the chain of command. This is how the mobilization strengthened the Ukrainian army. But we cannot say the same for the Russian army because Russia's mobilized forces are still seen as cannon fodder. Therefore, the mobilization and the presence of foreign fighters greatly benefited the Ukrainian army. Thanks to this, the Ukrainian army has significantly increased the number of military personnel actively involved in the war fronts. On the other hand, it was a known fact that there were foreign fighters in the Russian army before February 2022. Russia tried to hide its direct participation in the war in Donbass and initially the annexation of Crimea, stating that its forces were foreign volunteers and had no connection with its official military forces. However, in February 2022, with the start of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, there was a significant increase in the number of foreign fighters in the Russian army who took part in the clashes. Russian President Vladimir Putin has publicly welcomed fighters from abroad to join his military forces. Most of the foreigners who came to fight for Russia were registered with the Prizrek Brigade. The presence of foreign fighters also increased Russia's belief in the possibility of success in its goals in Ukraine at the beginning of the war. The Russian occupation of Ukraine, with its military personnel and equipment, gave Moscow great hopes. In fact, many military sources and war experts probably thought that the Ukrainian army would not be able to withstand the Russian attack and that the Ukrainian armed forces would split into guerrilla bands. Therefore, weapons sent to Ukraine were more likely to be useful to an insurgency. But things turned out differently. And today Ukraine has started talking about buying planes and missiles that can hit targets in the occupied territory. But still, the inequality in scale made itself felt. Russia continued to mobilize and did not count its losses. Presumably, the Kremlin thinks that they are too far ahead in resources and hopes to win this war of attrition. But we know that this war will completely burn all remaining Soviet weapons of Eastern Europe just because there is no alternative. The entire region will now adopt Western tanks, planes, and artillery. Of course, for now, we still see Soviet weapons at the front quite often. However, it is a fact that there's only a matter of time before they run out. The military stocks of both Ukraine and Russia are not endless, and the intensity of the war is in no way diminishing. Although military stockpiles were on the verge of depletion, Russia had hoped to divide Ukraine from the first day of the war. They sought to bridge a gap between the west and east of the country, and between the military and political leaders. Russian leader Vladimir Putin has called on Ukrainian generals to take power into their own hands. Russian propagandists insisted that Ukraine's civilian population was deprived of electricity and water because of the Ukrainian army's refusal to surrender. Moscow tried to divide Ukraine, but now the situation is in the opposite direction. That is, the Ukrainian struggle for freedom continues to shine. On the other hand, Ukrainians have insisted for decades to consider the Second World War as the most important war in their history. In every family, there was someone who fought. Just as in every family, there is someone who fell victim to clashes or invasion during the war. Now Russia is doing everything to make this ongoing war on the Eastern European steppes the most important war ever for the Ukrainians. As a result, there are now hundreds of thousands of soldiers in the trenches on the front lines of the war between Ukraine and Russia. Some of these soldiers, as we mentioned, are foreign fighters. In these circumstances, it doesn't matter what your language is. Differences become secondary. The past surrenders to the present. Therefore, Russia's invasion has forced Ukraine to confront some existential questions. And now Ukraine is responding in perfect solidarity. Symbolically, Russia tied the Ukrainians together in a network of solidarity, and the usual nonsense about the difference between the east and the west of the country gradually disappeared. Considering all of this, there is no obstacle for the Ukrainians not to win this war. We hope that the outcome of this solidarity network will bring victory to the Ukrainians in the coming days. You can support us with a super thanks button below. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to be informed about new videos. Thank you for watching us.